Using your debit card for most of your day-to-day purchases is a risky proposition. I get it. It can help with cash management, but most people don't understand the hidden problems or how debit cards work. Well, that's what we're going to tackle in this video. We're going to talk about why you should stop using the debit card and what to do instead. Welcome to this episode of the Affluent Entrepreneur Show, and I'll see you in the episode. Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Affluent Entrepreneur Show, and like I said, I want you to stop using debit cards, and we're going to talk about that. And I know that it's an unpopular thing because there's a lot of personal finance gurus that are out there saying use the debit card because they don't want you going into debt. They don't want you using credit cards. We'll talk about both. We'll talk about all of them because here's the challenge. Debit cards may be good for cash management, but if you're not careful, it could wipe out your whole account. All right. So here's the thing. There are those that are using debit cards as the vehicle to pay for everything. And it's a great idea because what we're trying to do is not allow people to live beyond their means. Let's face it, we live in a society where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. You can't get away from it. You know, it's the keeping up with the Joneses. You see it on social media. They're parading their perfect lives, their Lambo, their airplanes, their nice cars, their wonderful vacations. Okay? We don't know whether that's real. We don't know if it's fabricated. We don't know what it is. But what they're doing is parading in front of us, and many times we tend to buy things. I was just getting my hair cut and talking with my barber, and he knows what I talk about. And so we talk money, and we talk about finance. We talk about what he should be doing because he's relatively young. And he tells me about his friend who just bought a $5,000 watch. And I said, does he make a good amount of money to spend $5,000 on a watch, which you could get a used car for? And he says, no, he doesn't make a lot of money. I said, how old is he? He says, 23. Why would he do it? He says, because it looked cool. Because his friends thought he was cool. So he bought a $5,000 watch because of how it would look to the outside. It's one of the first mistakes, one of the biggest mistakes from a personal finance, personal wealth creation perspective if you start doing that. But so often what ends up happening is you'll hear popular commentators say, use a debit card because if it's not in the account, you can't spend it. And therefore, it'll keep you from making purchases beyond your means. And I totally agree with that. It's a great idea, but there are some inherent and hidden problems with debit cards that many people don't even think about. The fact is that debit cards and credit cards are not the same. They can't be thought about the same, and they shouldn't be used in the same way. In fact, I don't own a debit card. I don't use a debit card. I've never had a debit card. I don't even own an ATM card. Don't use it. Don't want it. Okay? That's me personally. So let's just walk through what the differences are between the debit card and the credit card and how, if you're going to use a debit card, I'm going to suggest you use it, and why and how to use the credit card if you're going to use it. Okay, I'd prefer for you to pay things cash if you can, but I know that that's not possible in today's world. We got to have a card of some sort because there's places that won't even accept cash. They don't want the green. They don't want the paper. And I get it. So let's just jump. I'm going to jump to the iPad. I'm going to walk you through a table that's going to compare debit cards and credit cards and give you an idea of where the issues may lie with doing that. So let me just jump to slides. And here we go. So the very first thing, and one of the biggest differences right now is this. It's the protections. We live in a time where fraud and cyber fraud is escalating. It's elevating. It's rampant. Okay, you've got data breaches all around, and when something happens, if there's fraud on a credit card versus a debit card, they're very, very different. In fact, if you look at a debit card, what ends up happening is that if the protections are very different, if within 48 hours you report it, that there's fraud on the card, or there's this erroneous charge, or that you lost the card, any charges will be limited to $50. Okay, so that's one. But if you don't notice it, if you don't know it for over 48 hours and you let it go, then your protection, your limit goes up to $500, assuming you report it within 60 days of the statement in which it occurred. So you have that limit. And then beyond the 60 days, it's unlimited. It's unlimited. You could lose it all. So if you're one of those folks, now, if you're following me and you're following the affluence blueprint and doing these things, that you're not one of these folks. You're tracking your money. You know where it's going. You know what's going on, how it's being played out, and that type of thing. But if you're one of those that doesn't look at your bank statements and you don't see it, and you're wondering where'd the money go, and you don't look at it and you don't report it for more than 60 days, and they charged $1,000, $2,000 using a fraudulent debit card or your debit number, it's gone. You've got completely unlimited, no protection. Now, with a credit card, though, the maximum is $50. The maximum is $50. So the biggest difference between debit cards and credit cards is the level of protection that you get with a credit card that you don't get with a debit card. Now, there's some other things that come along with this, and the other one is this, is that when we start to look at credit history, your debit card doesn't build any credit history. In other words, it doesn't help you build credit, your credit score, or anything like that. Now, granted, when we talk about credit, you know me, I'm not a fan of doing a lot of debt. Now, I do believe that there is productive debt and destructive debt, but I don't want people living beyond their means. And so in some senses, the credit history or the credit score isn't as important if we're not going to use debt. But at the beginning, we're going to probably use debt. We're going to need debt. So we want a good credit score. We want a good credit history. You can't get that with a debit card, but with a credit card, you can. It builds credit. It builds your credit history. It gives them something to work from. Number 3. So if we look at it from that, let's look at the cash impact. Now, this is another big one. Your debit card locks the cash up, or your cash is gone. In other words, the money is out of your bank account. In fact, if you use your debit card to maybe check into a hotel, for instance, if I use the debit card to check into a hotel, what many people don't realize is they put a cash hold on the full amount of your stay, plus typically a percentage above that for incidentals. So you may have this $1,000, $2,000 hold on your cash in your account. And in other words, it's as if it was spent. And until they take that hold off, you don't have access to that cash. Okay? That's one way that they do it. That's where they lock the cash up. The second thing that happens is that if the card is used fraudulently, then the cash is actually taken out of your bank account. It's no longer in your account. It's gone. And this is the thing that happens with a lot of folks when they get a debit card that's been compromised, is that the cash goes out of the account. They don't know that the cash has gone out of the account, so their balance is lower, and their normal payments, their normal checks to pay their bills or bill pay, go overdrawn because there's not enough cash in the account. And because they go overdrawn, they get insufficient fund fees, and they have penalties, and they got more fees, and it just becomes this perpetuating problem that gets worse and worse. And if we don't report it within the right time frames, your exposure is unlimited. Whereas when it comes to your credit card, there's no cash impact because you have the ability when you look at it to dispute the charge. It didn't come out of your account. It's on the account of the merchant, and the merchant or the credit card company, and you can look at it and say, I dispute that charge. And in fact, even if you paid the bill and you dispute it later, they'll add it back to the bill until they investigate it. So the money is never really out of your account. And so you have some protections there with respect to the cash impact that can happen when it comes to using a debit card versus a credit card. There's a couple of other things to think about. Are there other benefits? Typically with a debit card, and this is like rewards programs, purchase protection programs, all those types of things. With a debit card, there are none. With credit cards, there's many potential benefits depending on the card it is, whether it's an American Express or I've got certain cards that have no foreign exchange fees. I have cards that give me miles or give me points. I have cards that give me double protection on purchases, that give me rental car insurance, that give me travel insurance automatically by using the card. You get none of that when you start to look at using a debit card. And then number 5, here's if we look at this is that the habits. Now I'm going to be real straight. We're going to have this little frank conversation of debit versus credit here, and that is that debit cards are easier because you only spend. You look at the account and you go, I can only spend what I have in the account. So building good financial habits, and this is the reason a lot of the commentators say use a debit card instead of a credit card, is really, it's really good to help you stay within your means, to live within the confines of what you have in the bank account. You're living at the speed of cash, and that's it. The credit card, though, requires more discipline because it's credit. This is where we don't want to play the payment game. This is where we don't want to use the fact that I don't have to pay it off at the end of the month as the reason to buy something. That's when we start to get in trouble. So we need more discipline when we use a credit card. It doesn't necessarily build good habits if we don't use discipline. So here's how I would use the cards. Okay, I'm going to say that I'd prefer you have no debit cards. And if you have no debit cards, then you have to have some sort of credit card. But that means that credit card is paid off as if it was a debit card every single month. So you do not live on payments. You do not make payments. You will swipe the card only when you know that you have the money in the account to pay for it at the end of the month when the bill comes due. On the debit card side, if you're going to have a debit card, then here's how I would do this, okay? I would get a debit card, but I would get a separate bank account attached to that debit card at a different financial institution. So my banking is at a credit union. I love credit unions. I might find another credit union and I open up an account there and I get a debit card for that account, but not my other account. So all my income goes into account. I'll draw this out for you because I think this is really an important thing to think about, is that I have account. This is my main account, my main checking account, okay? And then I have my debit card, account, okay? So here's what I would do, is I'd have all my income go into my main checking account. All my income, 100% of my income goes into my main checking account, whether it's salary or anything like that. It goes into the main checking account this way, okay? And then I'm going to transfer to the debit card account. Now, this is in a different financial institution, and I'll explain why in a moment. Transfer enough money for my walking around money. enough money for my, when I'm going to use it for meals out or entertainment, I'm just going to transfer just enough to be in there. And the reason for this is then if the card gets compromised, then I don't have all of my checking account completely exposed. They can't get at all of my money. They can only get the spending money that was in there. So let's just say that I put $2,000 into the main account, and I take and put $200 into the debit account. So I transfer $200 to the debit card account, to the debit card bank too, or institution. So after I transfer the 200, I end up having $1,800 in my main account and $200 in my debit card account. If the debit card gets compromised and they charge against it, they use it, the most I can lose is $200. My $1,800 is safe. But if I have the debit card on my main account, all $2,000 is at risk. So if I'm going to use a debit card, I'm going to get a debit card at a separate bank for where my main accounts are. And I'm only going to transfer enough money in there for my walking around money that I'm going to use the debit card for. And why do I want you to do this at a separate bank? Because many financial institutions have a clause in their banking terms and conditions where they can, in a sense, raid other accounts under your name to pay for overdrafts or other or situations with other accounts. And so by having a debit card at a separate bank and only putting the spending money in there away from your main banking, they can't do that to you. So for instance, at my credit union, I have probably, I'm going to say 12 to 14 accounts. I know, but those are for my businesses and my personal account. And so there's a potential that if I had a debit card on one of those accounts and I have not looked at whether their terms allow them to raid the other accounts, because I don't have a debit card, so I never worried about it. But if they had the clause that allowed them to raid the other accounts, then all my money in that financial institution, that credit union, could be at risk. So that's why I'm telling you that if you choose to use a debit card because you sit back and say, I'm not that disciplined with credit card, I got to use a debit card, great. Then here's how you do it. You open an account at a separate bank from your main bank, and you just transfer the walking around money in there and use it that way. So that's why I think that we ought to not be using debit cards. There's just too much risk. There's too much exposure, especially in the cyber crime situation that we're in. It's prevalent. It's growing. I know a number of people that have had their identity stolen, their debit cards compromised in the process. So if it were me, I'd say no debit card, be disciplined with a credit card, and do it that way. Otherwise, if you need a debit card because you can't build the right habits yet, then just do it at a separate bank. I hope that this helps you. I hope that you find this of value. The fact of the matter is that I would shy away from debit cards if you're trying to build wealth, protect wealth, and do it in a safe way. All right. I look forward to seeing you in an upcoming video. And until then, always strive to live a life that outlives you. Cheers.